Bring it to you and so you're like
Here we go. Good morning. Today is Friday, May 5th, 2023, and it's 9:30 in the morning. This is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We are taking some testimony in order to keep pace with a request from Green Mountain Power and probably other similar other utilities maybe in the same situation. And the issue has also been moved forward in S100, the housing bill, so which we're also reviewing. So perfect timing for you to come in. Thanks for coming in and helping us learn more about the problem you're seeing and the proposal you have to address it.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having us today. My name is Candace Morgan. I work at Green Mountain Power, and with me today is my colleague
Mike Burke, Green Mountain Power.
And just for reference, we're aiming for about 15 minutes.
Perfect. We can do that for sure.
Thank you.
So the presentation that you have before you today, obviously we start off by talking about just a little bit about who we are and the communities that we serve, which is a reminder, covers a good portion of Vermont and especially some very rural towns in the southern and central portion of the state, which is really what has driven us to come here today to talk about ways that we can move with the urgency of the moment to help harden our system and make sure that people do not experience power outages to the best of our ability. I have my colleague today with me because he is our Vice President of Operations and is the person responsible for tracking weather systems and making sure that we're prepared whenever storms are forecasted. And he is our resident expert in that space. So I want to give him a little bit of opportunity just to talk about the trends that we have seen over time, and especially a little bit for this winter storm season, which I know you all are familiar with, but just wanted to kind of hit a little bit about why we feel like we're at a point of really wanting to move with urgency in this space.
Thank you, Candace. So I've actually been in that position since 2009.
Just introduce yourself for the record.
Michael Burke, Green Mountain Power. I lead field operations. I've actually been leading since the beginning of 2009 in that position. So I've seen a lot of weather in the last 14 years. And what I would say, of our top 10 storms, 3 of them were this year. All the top 10 are pretty much from 2010 till now. So we are definitely seeing a change in climate. This year, we're on average, we see probably 2 wet snowstorms a year. This year, 9 out of 10 were wet snow. So it continues to change very quickly. And the difference between a dry snow and a wet snow, we could have 3 feet of dry snow and there's no outage. You plow the snow, it's great for recreation, great. Wet snow is pretty much the same thing as an ice storm. It's just not ice. It can be worse than an ice storm because you can't move around. Like, at least with an ice storm, you can put chains on your tires, things like that. But the damage to the trees and the infrastructure is the same with wet snow as it is with ice. What really brought us here is the fact that we haven't had what's called a major storm since 2019. We had 4 major storms since December 16th, affecting mainly the same areas of Vermont, pretty much the southern 4 counties, but specifically the southeastern portion of the state, right on the ridge line, the east side of the ridge line, where the moisture piles up and it just keeps falling. We've had some projects in that area on the books for almost 5 years now, trying to get them permitted and built, and that's what brings us here.
Yeah, so back in 2020, we had filed and received approval for our climate plan, which some folks in the committee might be familiar with, which outlined a variety of tools that we were planning to implement both at the grid level for resiliency, which is what we're going to talk about today, and also more in the innovative home-based solutions like battery storage for homes and working through some of our resiliency zone work and other things that we have spoken of in different points with all of you. But it's the grid infrastructure components of that climate plan and some of the projects that we have had planned for a while that really brought us to come to the legislature today to think through exactly what that has looked like. So I'm going to skip ahead to this slide that has what looks like a bit of a dot map, right? And so this is a visual representation of outages experienced over the last 3 years at the different locations. And the red dots show outage, I think it's more than 35 outages in the last 3 years at those locations. And so this is in the Windham County and Southern Windsor County in particular. We've seen the impacts of the climate change and climate crisis happening in southern Vermont, just because that's where they are on the in terms of temperature, but we know that that's going to continue to move north. The projects that we have focused on this area, yep.
I'd like to, not only are they experiencing more heavy wet snow because it's warmer, faster down there, we do expect that to continue to move north. It's about Route 2 south right now. We expect it to be up to the Canadian border soon. The other thing I wanted to talk about that geographic area is we're actually experiencing many more high wind events as well. And that's also a product of the warmer temps and the lower pressure, stronger storms from the warmer temps and more moisture in the air. Butting up against the higher pressure, it creates gradient winds, which the eastern slopes of the gradient winds, anything out of the northwest, it's that area. So it's not just the precipitation, it's also where they are in terms of how our ridge lines are built and how the winds affect those ridge lines.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. And so as you heard about from Ellen in the walkthrough of the changes from the House in S100, we have some, we've asked for in the House committee language that would temporarily exempt us from having to file for Act 250 permits for these projects. So we trigger the Act 250 review process at different thresholds in 1 acre versus 10 acre towns. And the 1 acre town is a pretty short threshold, especially when you think about projects that are running on a linear basis, like our projects.
Is the acreage measured by the width of your right of way, not just length?
Act 250 language states for an electric distribution line, it's 20 feet. So 2,200 feet, which is like a line extension to one house, triggers Act 250. The majority of a lot of the state is 10 acre towns, and in those towns, it does not trigger it, and it's based on new corridor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you just help me understand the definitional difference between a 10 acre town and 1 acre town?
Yeah.
Sure. So the 10 acre towns are ones that have their own local review and sort of their own local zoning. So typically they are a bit larger by population and have their own sort of town infrastructure for those types of project review.
Hartford versus Heartland.
That's right. Yes.
Right
next to each other. And so it has felt most acute in the Windham County and Southern Windsor County area as well, just because there are quite a few, 1 acre towns, and those are the areas where we have projects that we're ready to build and ready to make sure that we can provide that storm hardening, especially on those main lines, because there's some slides in here that sort of talk about our power restoration process. And it's helpful. Those are the ones that really have to be as resilient as possible to ensure that, folks on the end of the line are also being able to get power. And so in a storm, if we don't have to worry about those, it means that we can get to other folks faster. And so this includes strategic undergrounding. And so going underground where we're able to, or it makes sense from both the terrain and just other infrastructure considerations. And it also means deploying some tools which we call spacer cable, which look out behind the State House. I think you can see it, although maybe not here.
It's further that way.
Further that way, sorry. So it has a steel rod on the top, and you can kind of see the 3 lines underneath it, and that allows trees to fall on that and sort of bounce off and not have anyone experience an outage as a result of that. And so we have some example projects towards the end of it too that talk about where these are and what are the areas that we're hoping to really hit first. And so the language that you'll see in S100 is a time limited exemption, because we realize that there's a lot of other work related to Act 250 underway. And we hope to work with folks to find a long-term solution to make this more predictable and equitable across all towns, regardless of their local zoning requirements. But we really think that right now we've got to prepare our southern counties in particular for winters ahead and not wait too long. So that's why we're here today.
So I note that it's talking about basically not being at occupancy permit when you're rebuilding an existing corridor, roads, or state rights of way.
Yes.
So can you walk through those three? I
Yeah.
was aware of the idea that if you're moving from an existing right of way out to a roadway,
Mhm.
you're back in a public space, so the public expects to see things like poles and wires.
Correct. That's the reason we asked for that is that so right now, some of these lines are out cross country where crews still have to put up hooks on their boots, go out, climb poles to get the wires back up. We want to bring them to the fully paved state highways where there's already infrastructure there to not have to have the crews do that in the first place. And the same with town roads. We already do receive permits from either V-Trans or the towns when we do go into those town or state right of ways. And that's the goal, to get there where there's already roads and already infrastructure.
Would you still get a permit from either V-Trans or the municipality when you move to the road? Is it Act 250 or is it some other permit? Just trying to understand what we're stepping out of and what we're stepping.
So in 10-acre towns, it's the permit from the town.
Yep.
And in 1-acre towns, it's V-Trans if we're in a state highway.
Yep.
And Act 250 if it's a 1-acre town and not a 10-acre town.
Okay, even if you're proposing moving poles and wires into the public right of way.
Yep.
You're
Correct.
still going through Act 250 when you're on a road. In
Yeah.
1-acre town.
If the acreage triggers it, yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, tell me down.
Say before, 1-acre towns, towns without zone,
Yes,
that's how they become 1-acre towns.
that's the definition of, yes.
Divided. Thank you.
Senator Watson?
Thank you. I think this is a great idea, and I am wondering about how you see this moving forward. Like, is this, because we were just talking about this as a change to S100, is
Yep.
that what is this how you're thinking about it, or is that something separate, or?
Sure. So we had presented to the committee, House Environment and Energy, back in early April, I think it was, just sort of what we were hoping to try and solve for this session, and what it's ended up becoming is an amendment to S100
Okay.
as a vehicle, given where we are in the session and kind of the connection to some of the other work in the underlying bill, which I am not all familiar with all the ins and outs of that bill.
There's a lot.
Big town.
Yeah, just a little. And one other point I just wanted to clarify, in terms of what the language that we hope for you all to see come back on S100, we would still be subject to any other applicable permits with the Agency of Natural Resources. So wetlands, other habitat considerations, we would file any requisite permits with them and sort of proceed just as we do for all of our projects, including those currently that do not trigger Act 250. Then we also have a series of best management practices with the Agency of Natural Resources as well that we adhere to on all of our projects currently and would continue to do so, because a lot of them don't trigger Act 250 at this point in time anyway. So this would kind of allow us to, we would be doing the work that we have been doing across all of our projects consistently.
I'm misremembering, or not people remember for sure, but maybe it's right. 10 VSA 6081Y, is that a definition of development trigger?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have changed that. This presentation we had talked about back when we were before the House. I think Legislative Council provided some a different approach in terms of how to get at the same outcome. And so the language that is modified in S100 references a different section of Title 10.
So change the definition of development to take this. And then I noticed you have a, proposing sunset on 2026. So can you just say a little bit about what you're thinking about next as a follow-on to a more permanent solution?
Yeah, absolutely. We had initially proposed actually 2027 to the House Committee because of 2030 and then eventually 2027 as part of our ongoing conversations. 2027 in particular was something we had thought of because it lines up with our existing multi-year regulation plan, which includes a lot of these projects, and our IRP as well. The committee seems to be landing on 2026, although I will clarify, they have not yet taken a formal vote on the amendment. So, but we would be anticipating, you know, as part of the other conversations that are ongoing related to Act 250 reform in general, that we would sort of want to work within and with the Natural Resources Board and others to figure out what the right approach is for these projects going forward.
Okay. It would make sense calling it, are all the DUs on, I mean, we're the particular DU we're seeing. Is everyone line up at 2027 cycle?
Yeah, so under current rule and practice, municipally owned utilities are they all have the 10-acre threshold. So most of their projects do not trigger Act 250 anyway.
Even if they're 1 acre.
Even if they are operating in 1-acre towns, they are treated under the 10-acre rule for their projects. So the only change for the only utilities that would see a change on this with this is Vermont Power, Vermont Electric Co-op, and Washington Electric Co-op.
No BED.
They are municipally.
Oh, yeah, I
Yep.
guess that's, I think that's
Plus,
funny, yeah.
Yep,
I just thought VIPSA.
I know.
Any committee questions for our guests? Never mind.
Will this have any impact, you know, so I see the example project. Are there any wetlands or anything in that area? And is there any concern that you have?
So every project that we actually have an environmental compliance person in-house at Green Mountain Power. We actually have 2 or 3 of them. And in our systems, we actually show where there's wetlands and any type of environmental sensitive area already. And yes, if there was something where we moved to where there was a wetland, we would still have to get an A&R wetland permit and all that.
Right.
Well, our design criteria is to avoid them.
Yeah,
And we're coming to
makes
state
sense.
highways.
Two.
My understanding is
Yeah.
you're trying to get away.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
There's a relocation process about removing existing infrastructure.
I'd say 90% of the time, yes, unless there is a communication company that may be there that decides in the end they want to stay, but usually they come with us.
Dig once.
They would have to pay for the maintenance of that separately
Once we left,
once you left.
yes,
Right, so that potentially.
it's incentive to come with us, yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, I would
Your
think the
fibers
incentive of being on the road would be pretty attractive.
Yeah.
Supposed to do it cross country.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion?
Thanks for coming.
Sarah
Thank
McDonald?
you.
So, when people seek to have wires put underground, they're charged more. Homeowners or neighbors that want stuff underground. So how is Green Mountain Power, is this a cost plus arrangement rates wise?
When we're talking about burying our lines so we've started we're using a new method called cable and conduit, which is bigger than the wires that we're replacing. So it gives us plenty of capacity, but it comes on a reel of 2,500 feet long. And we're finding it cost effective against the cost of rebuild overhead.
Nice.
So we're focusing on the most rural areas. We're not quite there yet on the bigger in-town substation ties, but in the rural areas, we're finding it cost effective to do this type of underground on our own.
Cost effective on rates or cost?
On construction. The construction of these is cost effective in comparison to what it would cost us to rebuild them overhead storm hardened. In other words, these lines.
I'm asking rate question.
Yeah. Rate, it's almost no difference in rates because we would be rebuilding them overhead storm hardened anyway.
Right.
So the lines that we're rebuilding are part of our storm hardening plan. They're going to be rebuilt either overhead or underground. And we've got the cost of the underground almost at par with the overhead.
And then the long-term savings.
And then the long-term savings, the reduced outages are all just
Big,
positive.
big conduit, please.
Yes.
Almost at par.
Okay, and one quick curiosity question, how deeply do you have to bury these sort of tougher cables? I mean, do you have to go in schedule 40 or they're just buried the way they are?
No, it is Schedule 40 conduit, both the old fashioned way of gluing the 10-foot sticks together and the cable and conduit that comes off the reel. And it's a minimum of 36-inch cover. If we can't get 36-inch cover, there are specs such as pouring concrete over it or putting it in steel, things like that.
Like the phone company does.
The phone company, I think, is only 24 inches minimum cover. We're 36, and then
they do.
they do other criteria if they can't get that depth. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for
Good
your
luck
time.
out there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Everyone.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We should work on climate change stuff now too.
Yeah.
I think in part, services become so reliable that outages will become less and less validated.
I would say that's true. I would say that's true, especially my generation when we're all working from home.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
So we have, we could do 2 minutes, 3 minutes, if you could just introduce, we had asked for, I sat with Mr. Chakowski to look at what we might request out of the JFO driven study.
This
So we
is
just
Riz.
have initial cut at that.
Oh, is that what I'm doing here?
We know you're versatile.
Do you have a document?
We don't,
That's right, because you didn't respond to my email last night. So let me forward something to Jude. Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. Okay.
I was instructed not to return to the State House after my second meeting.
I think that's fair.
Or do you just want me to send it to all of you right now?
Sure.
If you're cool with that.
Yeah. Just,
Uh,
yeah, and it's.
None was,
Do
Do you have a baby or something?
It's almost
on our website, that'd be great.
almost.
And would people like a hard copy? If you could maybe, once you have it, we'll go to the floor, but if you could put a hard copy on our desks and we can pick that up later today. Or something to look at. I know we're looking for something to discuss.
Can you go to the floor this morning, we were working for lunch.
I don't know how the floor is gonna roll today. I think we're gonna crank away to try to get as much done as possible, clear out the calendar, or as much as we can. So Senator McDonald, I think you were, anyway, so we'll check in. So you're sending that to us and we have copies, and then we'll take a look at it and it will be posted on our website. All right, so with that, I think we finished all our business, bells ringing, and we are adjourned.
Okay.
Well, then, can you